Hello, this is Heather Lee, and this is a continuation of a discussion about meeting students' needs in the classroom as part of EDS 318. And the document that we're looking at is from the Shared Documents section of our eCompanion website. And we've already discussed struggling learners, learning disabled students, and at-risk students in the previous instructional video. And in this one, we'll talk about the other two, English language learners and gifted students. So first of all, ELL, English language learners, are those who come from a home where English either isn't spoken or is not the primary language that they're hearing. So as a result, they would have some difficulties in only English classrooms, or in classrooms where only English is spoken. So some things that have been found to help students who are English language learners are to have very clear goals and objectives, so that they know exactly, you know what they're learning, and they know exactly what they're learning. So you want to share that with them and make sure they know the direction you're heading. To have well-designed routines so that your classroom becomes predictable and they can follow those routines and learn them, and that's one less thing that's getting in the way of them focusing on the instructional part of your classroom. Also, classrooms where participation is really encouraged, and you really think about not just what am I, the teacher, doing, but what are my students doing in every part of the lesson, so they're very actively engaged. Giving students informative feedback, in other words, letting them know how they're doing, being willing to take that time to talk through things with them, to explain to them exactly maybe what they didn't do correct so that they can make that change in the future. Giving them plenty of opportunities to practice what they're learning, to apply it to new situations. Allowing them to interact with other students so that they get practice, they can build some relationships, possibly have some relationships with people that they can get help and assistance from. And then frequent assessments that you actually use to reteach when needed. So you are monitoring their progress and keeping careful tabs on how they are doing. Now, we talked about the word accommodations back in the learning disabled section. And we definitely need to clarify that students learning English are not learning disabled. They may have a learning disability, but so might anybody else in these categories. But remember the difference between an accommodation and modification. Students who are learning English may need some accommodations. These are things that we adjust, not because they can't handle it or they can't learn it, but because it's going to help them to be more successful. So we as teachers should not have a sink or swim mentality, that they are just dropped into our classroom and if they can handle it, great. Or they'll learn English if they're just here long enough. But there are things we need to do strategically to help them. One of them may be to use their primary language at times. Now, immediately you might say, wait a second, I don't speak their primary language. So, of course, that's understandable. It could be that you have parent volunteers who speak the language at times. It also could be that you let the student perhaps research in their native language, read books, read informational materials in their native language. For example, if you are a history teacher and you want your students to be learning about a certain thing from your textbook, why not let them, if they speak Mandarin, use a Mandarin textbook if that is available from the publisher. They're still going to be learning the material. In fact, they'll learn it better because they're studying it in a language that they can relate to. They still may have difficulty expressing in English what they learned, but at least they're not reading from a textbook that's of a different language. So there are times that you can strategically use that primary language to help them learn in the academic subject areas. You also want to be willing to offer explanations again, to give them longer explanations and to answer their questions, often in a smaller group setting. You want to try to include redundant information. In other words, you're saying things again, and not only do you say it, but you also show it, and you've also provided it in writing. Even our physical gestures, the way we move our hands, the way we point to things, the way we act things out, can help a student who's working really hard to understand our English make sense and know that they're on the right track. You also want to, if you can, find out what they already know about. What are their skills? Many times if you start with what they have learned, what they were good at, maybe if they've moved to our country from a different country, you can find out what their strengths were, what their interests are there, and use those things to help them. You may, if you have any experience at phonics and sounding out words, actually teach them and use some of those skills even in a high school setting so that they can practice becoming better at learning. Vocabulary is huge for English language learners. We need to be very careful about identifying the key vocabulary that goes along with our subject area, teaching those vocabulary words very clearly, and helping students to grow in that area, because that will help them to become more successful in English. And also to help them when they answer a question, we can say it back to them, sometimes in proper English or by adding the things that we think might be missing, and encourage students to expand, to keep talking. It can be very challenging if you're an English language learner to participate at all in the classroom because you're intimidated and because it's not coming out the way you want it to come out. And sometimes we teachers can think that they don't know a lot, when really the reality is they know a lot, they just can't get it out. They can't put out what they want to say. And we should be sensitive to those things and willing to make accommodations that ELL students may need in our classrooms. The final category that we'll talk about are gifted students. And our definition here is a little bit deceiving. It says students with above average abilities. And that is true. Gifted students have above average abilities. However, those abilities, first of all, are not across the board. A student may be gifted in a certain area, maybe gifted in math, and just regular, or maybe even have a learning disability in other areas. So giftedness does not go across the board. And then also, above average doesn't mean just the students who get A's. Really, a truly gifted student who's diagnosed as such thinks about things in a much different way. Their abilities go far beyond what we might consider just a strong student. So gifted students, they can memorize like you wouldn't believe, hearing it the first time, and they never need to study it again. Or they might have such a strong interest in an area that they would night and day study about that area. They know far more than most people would know about those subject areas. So gifted students do need help. In fact, one thing that amazed me when I first got this concept, I realized through somebody else's instruction that gifted students were actually learning the least in my classroom. They were the least serviced. And I thought, what? How can that be? But when you think about your regular students, of course, you're kind of teaching them, they're on target, and everybody's learning and growing to some degree. Your weak students, you're trying to really focus on and really help them to meet the standards, and they certainly show progress. But the strongest students in the classroom often learn the least, because many times they already knew it. Or they could have learned so much more if we had given them the opportunity. But unfortunately, sometimes they're ignored because we think, hey, they're not a problem. But it should be our desire for all students in our classroom to be learning. So we should be providing them with opportunities to do that. One of the reasons that it's very important to meet the needs of gifted students is because if they are unchallenged, if we continue to ignore them and think they're okay in the back of the classroom because they get good grades, they begin to think that they're just, if they're not challenged, they begin to develop some poor habits. Attention, study habits, negative attitudes towards school, as if this is a waste of time and they're not learning. And sometimes they think that things should come that easy to them, that they don't have to worry about it. And then the first time in life that they are encountered with a challenge, they don't know how to address it, how to handle it. So they should be receiving challenge at all levels, beginning at the earliest grades, so that they learn that not everything should come easy to them, and how to rise to those challenges. So some strategies when working with gifted students. First of all, don't require that they repeat what they already know. I love the saying that says you can't learn what you already know. And if these students prove that they already know something, then we should be doing other things for them so that they don't have to learn those things. They don't have to sit through the instruction again when they already know it. So we should present things to them at a flexible pace. There may be times where they can skip over things or go at a faster pace or do something independently. They may be able to learn about the unit's topics in 1 hour of their own time versus 2 weeks in class time. So what we would do then, if they can prove to us that they have achieved mastery and already know what we're teaching, then we can condense the curriculum into the very basics they need to prove, or maybe a couple of things that they need to learn, and then we provide extra time. That extra time that they earn can be used for extending opportunities, for doing deeper things instead of the regular work that you would give them. Do something that they are interested in, something that's much more deeper and higher level and allows them to explore. We encourage them to set goals for themselves, to evaluate themselves and their progress. And we want to have some grading procedures that don't discourage risk-taking. Intellectual risk-taking is something that often gifted students don't learn because they think everybody thinks they should be smart, that they should always get the right answers, and so they might not take risks and really dive into areas and do things that they're uncertain about. So we need to make it easy for them to do that and really encourage them to go even deeper. We can provide materials beyond the textbooks that are challenging, that offer different viewpoints. Also providing horizontal and vertical enrichment. What that means is horizontal, like going across, means that we would still be in history class, but instead of studying this war that we're on, they might study other wars or compare those wars with each other. So we're still staying within the same subject area. Vertical is when you study something in much more difficulty. So it's still the same topic, maybe the American Revolution, but they're doing more challenging things with the American Revolution than your typical students are. And you also want to encourage the hobbies and interests that they have, because those interests can really develop their mental strategies when we give them time and encouragement to work on those things. So these are 5 categories of different types of learners and the needs that they have: struggling learners, learning disabled, at risk, English language learners, and gifted students. That's the end of this session. Thank you.